everybody. Welcome to the Training, Learning, and Development community. Thanks for joining us. Happy Wednesday to you. Today, we have Heidi Kirby with us, who has a really interesting topic that she's going to discuss. Pretty personal, and it's very professional too, of course, but making the most of the unknown. And what we're going to be discussing is Heidi has been on the job search, recently resigned from her last position as an instructional designer, and we're just going to discuss some of the things that she's going through, some of what her journey is like now, stuff she's discovering, and altogether some really interesting personal discoveries, I think. And we're just going to get into it. So thanks for joining us and doing this one, Heidi.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. I know that I think I sent a message to you and we were going to do a member showcase or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, but rather wait till I was working. But then we're like, let's talk about the fact that you're not working, because Absolutely. And I also, we're connected on LinkedIn, and the stuff you've been posting has been really, really interesting. It's pretty provocative and I think worth a discussion. So everybody, I've got a couple poll questions. If you guys want to check those out, it'd be interesting to see what the results are for that. And then we've also broken down the conversation into a group of questions. If you look in the bottom of your screen, you'll see an ask a question area. Feel free to add one. It looks like Letitia already added a question there too. And so let's get started first with Heidi. Why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself? Don't forget about your podcast. Just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Heidi Kirby. I got my start in learning as a college English professor and then moved into the L&D space. I'm currently pursuing and hopefully finishing soon a PhD in instructional design and technology. And also, of course, I have an L&D podcast called The Block, or Building Learning and Organizational Culture podcast, where I get to just have really cool people in L&D come on and chat with me. And then I get to just share it with everyone. So yeah, that's the quickest elevator speech I think I've ever given.
And we were talking before you came on the broadcast, we were kind of talking about the last few years and sort of your journey as an instructional designer so far. Can you sort of maybe give us some background on that? Like, you went college English professor, and then you moved into this whole thing called instructional design. What was that like? And what's it been like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a college English professor as an adjunct. And if anyone who is listening has ever worked as an adjunct, you know that it is not consistent in terms of schedule or pay. And so when I became pregnant with my son, I was like, this isn't going to cut it. But I had also, during my teaching career, started to, I had pursued a master's in education. And so I had learned that instructional design was a thing that people could do for money. And I was like, you know what, maybe I'll try this out. And so I actually started my PhD program first, and then had the idea that eventually I was going to transition into this instructional design career. But after a couple of semesters, I was like, I've already been doing all of this in the classroom. Why not just try to leverage those skills and find a position? And so it took me about a good 6 months to kind of learn all of the things I needed to know to make that kind of career switch / transition. But the person I met at NASA who hired me into my first instructional designer job was willing to take a chance on me and take me under her wing and teach me a ton of things. And so I landed my first role at NASA, of all places, no big deal or anything, but, and so I worked there until she left. And then I was like, all right, this is kind of a good stopping point for me as well. And so I ended up working as an instructional designer for a large health insurance company here in Cleveland. And I was part of a much bigger team of IDs than I've been since, one of 7. It was really great because it was a lot of just everyday design work and really just kind of digging in. And so after having a couple heart-to-hearts with my boss over there, I realized that she really didn't see me as the kind of person who would be a future leader or be eligible for a promotion. And I was like, well, I do see myself as a leader, so I'm going to see what else is out there. And I was able, actually, the day I had a conversation with her about a potential promotion was the day a recruiter from another company called me and asked me if I'd be interested in interviewing for another job. And so I ended up at that organization. I was there for about a year, and then I was laid off due to COVID, and picked up a contract with a small startup here in Cleveland. And by small startup, I mean, it was me and two other people. And so I did that for a little while. And then I had my most recent position, which was the manager of learning solutions, leading basically a customer education team.
Nice. Wow. Okay. So a couple questions here I have for you. Because I do want to get into your vision as an L&D leader. But prior to that 6 months you said after you left as an adjunct professor, the 6 months it took for you to sort of get your head wrapped around instructional design. What did you do in that 6 months? What were some of the things you did?
I was still adjuncting a little bit. Like I was still doing that part-time. But really there was a lot of podcasts that I was listening to, a lot of actually TLDC, to give you guys a plug, like tuning into the webinars and things like that. Anything that was like free that I could consume to kind of fill some of those skill gaps. The other thing is that I was really bad at visual design, like really bad at visual design. So I took some time to kind of do like it was Linda back then, but like the LinkedIn learning courses and read like the non-designers design book and things like that to kind of improve those skills too.
Okay. So kind of just a really maybe informal, like absorption of all kinds of instructional design stuff and all of that. So now I know that it was kind of the primary thing about this conversation was you wanted to talk about what the reasons were that you had, why you wanted to resign from your last position. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So the first thing I just want to acknowledge is that like I really realize the amount of privilege that I have to be able to resign without something backed up, because I haven't always been in that position, but I was uniquely able to do that this time around. And so I just want to acknowledge that I completely understand that not everyone can do that. Not everyone has the financial means, whatever means to be able to do that. But luckily, I was able to kind of work things out with my husband and say, like, let's give this a try. But really what it came down to for me was a few things. It was that the role that I was in was not the role that I started. The things that I was doing day to day were not what I was brought on to do, right? So there was a whole goal and vision that I was asked to create as part of coming on as a new leader in learning and development. And I was asked to like redo a lot of the training, to really kind of put a new spin on things, a new vision. And then when it came time to enact that vision, I also didn't have the support in terms of like the resources, financially, human resources that I needed to be able to see that through. And so those were kind of the biggest things for me. And what was really odd was that it took me a really long time to realize how unhappy I was with the role as it had progressed. And so I was actually talking to my therapist about how, like, I didn't know why, but I was just so depressed. And she was like, well, what about work? And I'm like, I'm not stressed out. I'm not really even working on anything because everything's kind of on hold right now. And she's like, is that a problem for you? And that question flipped on me like that was so eye-opening, because I was like, yeah, we have this mentality that to be unsatisfied with your work or your job that you have to be crazy busy or burnt out or overworked. But sometimes it could just be that it's not what you thought it was going to be, or that you're not busy enough, or that you're not innovating enough.
Yeah. So it ended up not being kind of the challenge that you were expecting?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was also doing a ton of facilitation of training.
Mhm.
And that's why I got out of the classroom. I was not really, I didn't want to do that. So.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. And so you resigned, and now you are looking for something new. And so what kind of vision have you created for yourself? In fact, Letitia has a question in here asking, what plan of attack have you created?
It's a very good question.
For your job search.
Yeah. So I have to admit that before, I have been kind of like the shotgun approach person, where it's like apply to 150 jobs so that you can get 1 or 2 interviews. And but I would never give that advice to other people when I would talk to them about their own career. And so someone finally a very good friend of mine had to finally be like, hey, listen, take your own advice and stop the shotgun approach. And so that really made me have to take a step back and look at, what is it that I care about? What is it that I want? And there are so many different career resources out there that I could list off that helped contribute to this. But basically what it came down to was I had to decide what I wanted from like the learning and development standpoint, right? And so I'd really like to build a learning function, right? That's something I feel passionate about. I am very tired of hearing this is how we've always done it. And I'm very innovative and open to change. So I've been predominantly applying to and interviewing with startups specifically because of that kind of build it from the ground up mentality. The other thing is I really enjoy leading people. I really enjoy helping people, coaching people. If you've talked to me, you know that that's kind of my jam. And so I am really looking for more of a people leadership role. But then my dear friend, Erin Chancellor, who is like very much about your personal brand, told me that I needed to go on Glassdoor and pick like your top 3. It's like a top 3 priorities that you're looking for in a new job. And mine were the compensation and benefits package as a whole, the strong company leadership, and a company's culture and values. And so like, aside from the learning and development thing, you also have to pick what are the things that matter most to you, and then find the companies, find the roles that applies to. And then it helps you really narrow down your search. And also just putting myself out there and letting people know that I'm looking. I have a great network of people who have sent me leads, introduced me to people they know, things like that, who've really helped along the process.
Mm-hmm. How about that whole experience where you're doing the research part of it on Glassdoor? Was that difficult at all, or how would you describe that? Was it a challenge, or was it?
You mean picking those kind of
priorities? Finding those things. Yeah.
No, because it's like a pre-populated list. It's like I don't know how to. There's like a list of like 10 or 12 things, and so it literally took me 10 minutes maybe to say what's most important to me. Mm-hmm. It may not take everyone that short of time, but I've worked at a bunch of different places, so I feel like I have a little bit better of an idea of what I'm not looking for. So but yeah, it's just like I forget which section it's in, but it's just on like the website on Glassdoor where you like go to fill out your profile. It has you like, what are the most important things to you?
Yeah.
And it just, other ones are like work-life balance, promotion opportunities, kind of things like that.
That's great. Wow. Interesting. Yeah, but it is going to be just limited to the companies, I suspect, that are like participating in Glassdoor. right? So it would only be like folks that are using Glassdoor related services to try to find employees?
Not always. It's more of like a way to kind of, like Aaron was like, you need to look at this every day. And it's more of like a personal mantra, I guess,
I
to
see.
kind
Yeah, it
of,
just helps you define
yeah,
it for yourself.
yeah, for sure. Most of my jobs, my actual searching is done through LinkedIn.
I see.
I just find that it's got the biggest umbrella for postings, but
Right.
I'll look at Google every once in a while too.
Yeah. I just want to mention real quick, just a quick tidbit here in the polls, because we've got the 2 polls going. There are 2 questions. The first one asking, are you currently looking for work? And the majority is like 63.6% are looking for work that are in this TLD cast right now. And then also my second question was, have you changed jobs since the pandemic began? And same number, 63.6 says yes. So that's a really interesting sort of some stats in there for this group here. Now let's hear about what kinds of things you're looking for in your next role.
Yeah. So, I mentioned a little bit about the people leadership, kind of the building a function. But I've mostly been applying to kind of the director level roles, manager level roles, manager of L&D, even like customer education manager, things like that.
Nice. Very nice. And how's it been so far? Can you describe your experience?
So it's been slow. Let's be real. It has been slow. Yeah. I think that, I don't know if it's time of year or what, but October was the end of the fiscal year for a lot of companies. I'm actually seeing a little bit of movement pick up. Now that it's November, I'm seeing things go a little bit faster. But I mean, I have gotten like rejection letters. Like I've been technically looking, I've been casually looking since like the end of August, but I really haven't focused my search until about 6 weeks ago. And I got a rejection email the other day and I didn't even remember applying to the job. It was so long ago.
Yeah. So
like just the communication, there have been, and I am, a crazy advocate of, if you make it to the hiring manager interview and you get ghosted, you dodged a bullet, because I think that if you speak to the hiring manager and they don't give you some kind of communication that you're not moving on in the process, that is completely unprofessional, right? Phone screen, I feel like you should probably hear something back, but I've had a handful of phone screens that are just sitting here on this Post-it note on my computer that I just haven't heard back from in weeks.
Wow.
Just nothing either way. So I'm like, am I still in consideration for any of these? Or, and then, I think that by and large, my experience with recruiters has been lovely, but lately I am just getting such a sense of burnout from recruiters. I can't tell you how many that I have spoken to that just seemed like from the very beginning of the call that they would rather be anywhere else than on the call with me. And it's really, really hard to have a positive conversation, have a productive conversation, and just really, prove yourself when the person seems like they don't want to really talk to you. So, and I know that recruiters are probably super busy right now, and I might be the 20th person they've talked to that day, and so I try to really be sympathetic to that, but it has been slow going.
Right. Wow, Heidi. I mean, I'm looking in the chat. Aaron, Leslie, Christine, same issues. Suzanne is saying the Great Resignation is an actual thing, and it really is. I mean, that information is out there, and like Danny's saying, lots of dysfunction and unhappiness out there. So that's been tough. So how do you deal with the ghosting or the rejections? Is there anything that you found that just kind of helped you manage that stuff?
Yeah. So I just want to say I love these Jackie and Aaron's. They just got rejected for jobs they applied to in the summer. That's great. But as far as dealing with rejections and ghosting, right when I think it was the morning of my last day on my previous role that I recorded my podcast episode with my friend Sabina, who wrote the book Agile Unemployment. And it was really good closure because we just kind of talked about like, how do you manage being unemployed? And the important thing is to not look for a job for 40 hours a week, because that's, if you're doing kind of a targeted job search, there's no way you can possibly do that. Like if you're applying to like a core 4 or 5 jobs that speak to you a week, you can't spend 40 hours on that, right? And so that's kind of, you know, so what do you do when all that rejections and ghosting comes along? And my approach has been to take time for me, take time for self-care, but also help other people. And so I put out a post at some point last week, I can't remember which day, that says like, hey, does anybody want help? You know, is there anything I can help you with while I have all this free time? Because that's what I like to do when I'm in my head too much, is like just help other people. It helps me feel better. And I've just had like back-to-back conversations with people the past couple of days as a result of that, just talking to people from all different walks of life. Some people are looking for a job. Some people already have one and just was like, hey, I've seen you on LinkedIn. Let's chat. And it's just been really great. And it has taken my mind off of those rejection emails and that ghosting so much that I'm not just sitting waiting for my phone to go off. Right.
No, that's helpful. And so that's something you'd probably recommend to other people too, that are kind of going through this situation. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Now, I've got a bunch of questions from people. Is it okay if I just kind of go through some of the, okay, let's see. Okay, let's start with this one. Lauren Flores is asking, how do you remove the higher education mindset and jargon from your application materials and interview responses if that's the only industry that you've been in?
It's kind of like learning a new language where you kind of have to use like immersion as the best way to learn it. So I would say, start listening to the podcast, start listening to the conversations that people are having in the corporate world, if that's what you're going for. And then start really looking at all the different job postings, because that'll kind of tell you what the jargon is. You'll start to recognize, okay, well, I've done that, but we call it this, and you'll start to kind of learn that. And then also invite people to informational interviews who are working in the kinds of roles that you want, so that you can learn some of that jargon, so that you can adopt some of it.
No, that's great advice. I totally agree, because there is, I think from more on the corporate side of things, there's a ton of content like conversations like ours, podcasts like yours, where you can actually pick up on, more of that corporate training mindset. And hopefully that'll kind of offset the higher education stuff that might already be embedded in you. So that is a great piece of advice. Thanks, Heidi. Let's see. Leslie is asking, there's so many positions that require you to do take-home work or presentations. I have been in the job search for many months and spent hours on many different assignments, all for jobs I really wanted. How do you balance putting your best foot forward on these tasks while also protecting your energy, especially when companies don't give you a time limit on how much time you should spend on a presentation or assignment? That's a good one. I've seen people ask this type of question in the past. So what do you think, Heidi?
It's very interesting, because it wasn't nearly as predominant when I first joined the field. In fact, like having a portfolio wasn't I would argue that it's a requirement at this point. If you want to truly be competitive in instructional design, you need to have a portfolio. But then it makes me irritated that so many positions, if you're basically required to have a portfolio, then also expect you to spend a ton of time on a separate assignment when they can see your work, they can ask you about your work, they can ask you about how you produced your work based on your portfolio. When I was hiring, one of the things that I didn't want someone to spend time on those types of presentations. So I specifically required a portfolio so that I could look at that and ask questions.
Yeah.
I just think that at some point you're going to have to pick and choose, right? You're going to have to choose which opportunities. If it's, if they're all jobs that you really want, you're going to have to just narrow it down and pick and choose from those jobs, which you're working to move forward for, but also know when they're asking for too much. And that's hard because it's different for every person, but know when they're asking for too much. If someone's asking you to put together a whole course, a whole product, to the point where it feels uncomfortable, I think that becomes an issue. My biggest issue as a hiring manager with the assignment piece. And I've seen it done really smartly, but I've also seen it done where it's like, create us a module on X, is that you are basically setting yourself up for a miscommunication, because when that person starts a job, like if they do a good job on the assignment that you give them, they are not, let me back up. When they work on the assignment, they are not working on it under the same conditions that they will be when they join your team. They're not going to have 12 hours or some ridiculously short period of time to work on an assignment. And you're not going to see their best work because of that time constraint. So it's almost like a misrepresentation. What I've seen work a lot better is like an assignment that's like, tell us how you would approach X problem, or tell us how you would do this thing, or talk through your design process if we said we were going to give you this assignment. Like, there are ways that you can get to their skill set that don't require like, here, make this finished product, right?
Right. No, and I love the feedback we're getting in the chat. Christiana, who is a fantastic senior director, she's saying that only when the candidate is a super finalist is that they might ask for any kind of project.
Sure.
Yeah. The chat is fantastic with stuff. I know I've had guests in the past that instructional design is sort of almost like contractors and professional freelancers that say, no, if they're asking for me to do a project, no, just look at my portfolio. Otherwise, I don't even want the job. My portfolio speaks for itself. So I've seen it go a variety of directions there. Let's get through a few more of these questions here. Here's another one from Lauren. How would you manage relationships with folks at your current job if you're considering searching and applying for new opportunities? When is the right time to share with your supervisor, colleagues, mentors, etc.?
That's a really good question, because I chose to resign before I had something lined up because I wanted to put my job search out in the public, and I couldn't do that while I was still working. Unfortunately, your current job, at least where I work in Ohio, my current job is Ohio's an at will, is that what it's called? Where they can fire me without cause at any point. So if they find out that I am looking for a job, that can literally let me go on the spot without reason or without cause. So it is not safe in Ohio to really say that you're looking, right? As a hiring manager, I like to always assume that my team members are always looking, or always keeping their options open, because I always keep my options open. And my goal as a leader is, if they want my job one day, to prep them for that, so that they don't have to leave, so that they can eventually get my job and I can move up. But that's a really tough question, because I don't think there is a right time. When you're leaving, that's the right time to share that you're looking for a new role.
Yeah, it's probably just best to play it safe, right?
Yeah.
All right, good one. Let's see. I've got more questions here. A couple more. Okay, so Oh, Susan is just curious. Susan Manos is curious about
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're searching primarily for remote jobs or on-site in your area or both.
I think Kim from Cinecraft is on this call, and so she knows that there aren't a ton of L&D jobs in the Cleveland area. Also, I've worked at home now for a good almost 2 years, and I am not looking to go back on site. So I am looking for remote jobs where it's like, up to 20% travel, like maybe come visit the team a few times a year, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels like that's probably moving more towards typical,
Yeah.
I don't know, for sure, but I feel like that's the case. Okay, a couple more questions. Let's see. I've got one from Christine here about adding that it looks like a lot of postings she's seeing are requiring HTML, and she wanted to know how to learn the skill quickly to apply to her resume. I can take a stab at that too, because I definitely use a lot of HTML on a daily basis.
I learned HTML from having a MySpace back in the day. That was predominantly where I learned, but there are some apps that are out there that are really good for just like HTML basics. I can't think of the names of any off the top of my head, but I've downloaded, just type in learn HTML in your app store, and there's like little apps where it's like, gamified and daily little challenges and things like that. But also, I don't really consider jobs that require things like that, because to me, HTML coding, even though I've done it, coding, things like that. Like I recently had an interview where they wanted me to like build chat bots. And I was like, these are not learning functions to me, right? If there's a reason to know HTML, sure. But also realize that most of your applicants are not going to know HTML if they're instructional designers.
Right. I found I know that I've even found some value as far as learning some programming skills from like kids stuff, like kids games.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they say they're for kids, but I've actually sat down and looked at some of them. I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun. And I'll be like, whoa, an hour's gone by. But what have I learned? Look at this. I know how to do this in JavaScript now. But yeah, take a look at kids stuff too. This is pretty funny, this whole MySpace and HTML thing. You guys must have been like super nerds, like actually using HTML and in MySpace, because I don't remember ever doing that. But in my MySpace.
Yeah, to like put pictures in your MySpace or to play music when someone visited your page.
Yeah. No, I did do that. I remember I used to have the X-Files theme song launch whenever you went to my MySpace page. That's terrible.
Yes.
Okay, so let's wrap it up here. We've got one last question. What opportunities have you found in your free time?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because one of the first things I did was I met with one of my old bosses, who's actually a really good friend of mine, but we haven't met since pre-COVID. And she was like, you need to establish your LLC for any side work that you pick up in the meantime, because she knows how I am and she knows I can't sit still for very long. So I actually created an LLC. So I have like technically my own consulting business that I can start things on the side, but I've also planned a general outline for an instructional design book that I will be writing at some point when I'm done with my dissertation, because I am not going to allow myself to procrastinate from my dissertation in the meantime. And then I've also been contacted by a company that I'm working with now on some like instructional design course material. I've been working on I've been talking to people for new podcast episodes for next year. Just working on like all sorts of different crazy things, and consulting opportunities, talking to just different people. And yeah, so there's been a lot of things. I also found, this has nothing to do with work at all, but, I don't want to make it sound like all I do is work all day. I also found that for the Nintendo Switch, and I didn't know this, there is a Zelda Link's Awakening game that's been like redone from the original Game Boy. And it's a game that I had that came with my original Game Boy back in the day when it was like the large gray Game Boy. And so I've been playing through, well, first I played through Luigi's Mansion because my son begged me to buy it, but he's 5 and it's a little advanced for him. So I played through it and he just watched. But now I'm playing through the Zelda game again. And so it's very cool to like play through a game I played through when I was 8 years old. And now to have him there and watching. So yeah, that's what I've been doing in my free time.
So I think
video games.
Yeah, it sounds like make sure that you're at least finding some fun time for yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Because I know, like, there is a period in my life where I was going through a few jobs here and there, and it's like, and it really can bog you down. And finding some time for yourself is super important. Just to remember what it's like to not be doing a job search. Sure. Yeah, this is great. And I also want to mention, if there's any of you out there that has free time and, TLDC at all can be a tool for you to use to find a job or talk to people or meet people or do anything like that, let me know. Just reach out to me. I mean, it's just pretty much me like doing stuff. So just tell me if there's a person that you want to have interviewed on TLDC, if you want to interview them on TLDC, if you want to, take over stuff like this, let me know, because I am happy to help with anything like that. And I could absolutely like use the help. So keep that in mind, everyone. All right. Well, Heidi, thanks so much for sharing this. Great conversation.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Everyone connect with Heidi if you aren't already.
Yes, please do.
I don't think this conversation is over. Lots of folks I'm sure would love to continue talking about this. So sure. Just let me know if you guys also tldchat.us, our Slack group. Let me put that in the chat there for you guys. If you want to join up there, we have conversations there on a regular basis about all kinds of stuff. Christine's in there on a regular basis. So, all right, everyone. Thanks a lot. We'll don't forget, next week we have our Ideal 21 conference, our inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility for learning conference, which is great. We've got a couple hundred people already signed up for it, and it's going to be fun. It's free, so make sure you sign up for that one. Let me put the URL for that, ideaforlearning.com. Sign up. It's free. It's going to be great. The speakers are fantastic. I've been having the best time putting this one together. So, that's it. We'll see everyone later. Thanks again, Heidi.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.